Pokemon Champions is coming out next year, and we've seen a decent amount of footage in the trailers that they've released so far. But one thing I haven't seen talked about nearly enough is the removal of what I think is Pokemon's single worst mechanic, which are IVs. And in this video, I'm going to summarize quickly what IVs are. Then we're going to talk about why we're pretty sure they're gone and why I'm happy about that, and also what that means for competitive Pokemon as a whole. IVs are individual values. I always thought they were inherited values because they pass down from when you breed Pokemon. But, anyways, individual values are a number between 0 and 31, and each Pokemon has one for all 6 stats. An increase in 2 IVs corresponds to an increase in 1 stat point at level 50, which is what Pokemon Champions is played at. And that is 16 points in each stat that you basically always want your Pokemon to have. When VGC started, you would literally have to crack the game's random number generator to get these perfect statted Pokemon, and that was a huge barrier to entry for VGC. Starting in Generation 6, Pokemon has made it way easier to get Pokemon with the IVs that you want, and nowadays we just use the bottle cap item to make any IV 31, but there were a lot of people who got their start in VGC in Generation 6. I think that was the first real surge in popularity, and the accessibility of the game was a big part of that. But nowadays, while it is easier to get a Pokemon with a 31 IV, it is much harder to get a Pokemon with a stat that has any other specific value. Which is a shame, because every single Pokemon that doesn't use its physical attack stat would like a 0 for its attack IV. This comes up in 3 cases, more or less. The first is when they get hit by the move Foul Play, which sees sporadic use. It's kind of format dependent. The second is if you get confused and then hit yourself in confusion. The damage is based on your own attack stat. And finally, if you are forced to use Struggle, that damage on your opponent is also based on your attack stat. All things considered, the difference between a 0 attack IV and a 12 attack IV that is far more easily obtainable is likely going to be 2 or 3 hit points in one use case that happens maybe 1 in every 100 battles. But a 0 attack IV on, say, a Chi-Yu, for example, might take hours of soft resetting to find. Trust me, I've taken hours to find one. And that sounds like a dumb use of time, given how unlikely it is to make a difference. But I have had games in tournament where the difference between me winning and losing is the attack IV on my Pokemon. It's happened, I think, exactly once, but that's enough for me. If I am paying for flights and a hotel and a crazy entry fee just to compete at a tournament, I'm not taking that risk. And I think most competitors don't. For what it's worth, if you are just playing at locals or just playing on the in-game ladder, then maybe the math does work out and you catch that 12 attack IV Chi-Yu that you encounter pretty early on. But if you have aspirations of ever competing at a major tournament, well, it's not like you can just go and catch another Chi-Yu, right? So maybe you should start soft resetting just to be safe. The other stat with a non-31 IV on a regular basis is speed. Many Pokemon want to be as slow as possible to go first in Trick Room, and they want a 0 IV in their speed stat. Sometimes you want a Pokemon to be slower than a common Trick Room abuser, but otherwise as fast as possible, which is why you see Amoonguss that tend to have a 48 speed stat with a 26 speed IV, which underspeeds minimum speed Calyrex Ice Rider and Ursaluna, but outspeeds all the other Amoonguss. And speaking of Calyrex Ice really wanted a 0 speed IV and a 31 attack IV. But on the other hand, your Calyrex Shadow Rider wants a 0 attack IV and a 31 in its speed IV because it is a fast special attacker as compared to a physical Trick Room sweeper. But you can only catch one Calyrex in your game, so even though they can change forms, they can't really change roles now, can they? So if you can't trade for a second one, you'd have to reset your game just to start soft resetting for the second one. This is by far the most time-consuming part of getting a team ready for a VGC tournament. If you have the right items, getting your Pokemon with the right moves, EVs, and etc., just it doesn't take that long. But catching the Pokemon with the right IVs might take longer than putting the rest of the team together combined. And their actual game impact is so minimal. It means special attackers will take a couple more hit points from foul play or confusion. It actually won't have any impact on a Trick Room Pokemon at all, since they all have to run a 0 speed IV to underspeed other 0 speed IV Pokemon. So if IVs were to disappear, the speed tiers stay pretty much the same. The impact of IVs on the game as a whole are so minimal, but they are an outsized barrier to VGC and have been throughout VGC's history. And while I don't want to talk about hacking too much, I think this also solves the problem of competitors using hacked Pokemon at tournaments, because the number one reason for people hacking Pokemon is to save time. They look at the risk of getting caught compared to the reward of the time saved, and with the time saving dropping basically to 0, there is no incentive to hack Pokemon anymore. That one change solves the problem that the Pokemon Company has been trying to deal with for years. And this is why I called IVs Pokemon's worst mechanic. It is a dumb system that they made before they realized the game would ever be competitive. And every generation since then, they've been trying to rectify that mistake by making it easier and easier to get perfect Pokemon. But if you are interested in me doing a history of IVs in Pokemon video, leave a comment down below and like and subscribe. We are so close to 10,000 subscribers, and I would love to hit that when Champions comes out. I think that would be really cool. So yeah, anyways, I hope you enjoyed my rant about IVs, and here's why we think they're not in Champions, because I haven't shown you that yet. And this hasn't been officially announced, but they did show a screen where you can customize your Pokemon stats with in-game currency. And that includes what are essentially EVs, your nature, your ability, and your moves, but not, notably, your IVs. Surely, if you could use currency to max out your IVs, this would be the screen to do it on, right? I mean, why wouldn't it be? Not to mention, the Gardevoir on screen has stats that would only occur if its IVs were all 31. And this trailer has been pretty competitively accurate. They would know that a Gardevoir with no physical attacking moves should have a 0 attack IV to be optimally built. But that customization or information is nowhere to be seen on any screen revealed so far. So we can be pretty confident that IVs are not in the game. It also makes sense logistically because this is going to be an entry point for a lot of new players in competitive Pokemon. And if you have to explain this entire system to new players, and players have to feel like trading Pokemon is a fair use of currency, think about it. If in the intro you were told that every single Pokemon you obtain, you have to use some random number of currency to max out all of its IVs, and like 99% of the time, that is all they're ever used for is just attacks on every Pokemon that you just have to max them out. That would suck. It makes sense in the context of an RPG where each of these Pokemon are individual and you want to take the time to find the optimal Pokemon by catching multiple of them, but not in the context of a competitive mobile game. And when there is no breeding mechanic in the game, getting a 0 attack IV or getting a 0 speed IV Pokemon would also suck. And it's a lot of explaining for very little payoff. Whenever we reduce the barrier to entry for VGC, we see a huge influx of players. Champions is going to lead to a huge influx of players, but making the game more accessible by removing IVs is going to make it so these new players actually stick around. We also see other changes to how stats work to reduce the barrier for entry. One example of that is in the past, currently, if you allocated your 510 effort value points in numbers that are multiples of 4 but not multiples of 8 into 3 stats, then you get 65 points on top of whatever your base stats are. But if you allocated those 510 EVs across 5 stats, then you'd actually get 66 points on top of your base stats. And I'm not going to explain why mathematically, but Pokemon seems to agree that this is unnecessarily confusing for a newer player. And the traditional EV system is also gone, And now you just have 66 points that you can allocate however you like, which is, again, it's awesome. It simplifies the system without making significant changes to the competitive Pokemon that we know and love. These are common sense solutions to the game that have minimal competitive impact and a huge impact on the new player experience. IVs are gone, and to that I say, good riddance. But what do you think? Are you excited about this change, or are you going to miss IVs? Let me know in the comments, and make sure to like and subscribe, and thank you to all my channel members. Y'all are the best. Until next time, I'll see you all later.